Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Laura Johnson, and I work with UVM Extension as the pollinator support specialist. And this is, we're into our second month of spring webinars with the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association and UVM Extension. And today we are going to take a tour of the Pollinator Support Plan tool on the VVBGA website, the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association website. And I'm going to be your guide today, your host today on March 6th, 2024. I'll get us started. So today we are going to first address the hamburger in the room. If anybody saw the description in the email that went out as a reminder or saw the description online, I drew some or asked for a parallel between hamburgers and pollinator support. So we'll talk about that first. And then we're going to get into what is a pollinator support plan. I've used this acronym PSP to reduce the number of times I need to write it. Who is the pollinator support plan tool for? Why use the tool? Where is it located and how to use it? So, what does a hamburger have to do in common with pollinator support? And there's just a few of us on the call today. So, if anybody has any ideas on this, I welcome you to either put it in the chat or unmute if you have a guess. Um, there's a few responses that could be made for this question, but I'm just going to share one. If I get any feedback from folks, any guesses? Hearing nothing, I will reveal my response that I wanted to share, and that is a handful of pollen contains about the same number of calories as a single hamburger. So I thought that was a pretty neat tidbit of information to learn. And it was also, or is also, a good reminder of if we're thinking about supporting pollinators on our farm, what does that mean? And that part of that means providing them food. So pollen provides protein and minerals and fats to insect pollinators on the farm and within any landscape, while nectar supplies carbohydrates and sugars. And then, so those are kind of two key pieces to supporting at least insect pollinators in our farm landscapes. So what is a pollinator support plan? And it's really a tool for you to use to identify and plan for resources that pollinators need on your farm and per your management practices. So remembering who some of these wild pollinators are, or maybe you have managed pollinators and you want to support their well-being as well, but moths and beetles and butterflies and bees, of course, are all consumers of the pollen that we just discussed, nectar, and are also needing other layers within your farm landscape that might provide nest space or water and other management or areas on the farm that we'll talk about in just a minute. So a pollinator support plan also helps to identify those different components of your farm that might be used to or enhanced to support pollinators, whether that's through food or nesting. So that might include cover crops if you use cover crops on non-cropped areas. So that could be field margins or pathways. Manage pollinators if you have honeybees or commercial bumblebees, pest management strategies, tillage, and other things. So it's a tool to kind of help identify these different components within the farm landscape and within your farm management practices. So who is the pollinator support plan for? If you grow insect pollinated crops, and here's a list of some of them, then you might want to consider creating a pollinator support plan or thinking about planning for pollinators on your farm. So, the list on the left are a series of crops that are really highly or moderately dependent on insect mediated pollination. So, our squashes and apples and berries and blueberries, melon. And on the right hand side of this of these possible crops that you are growing on your farm are those that are maybe optimized by insect mediated pollination. So you may have more yields, you may have better looking fruit if you are thinking about if you're thinking about how pollinators are impacting the success of those crops. So these are just some examples. Also, it might be for you if you are growing crops for seed production, and those that are not wind pollinated and need animal mediated pollination. Maybe you are concerned about general on farm biodiversity and or maybe concerned specifically about pollinators or the well being of other insects on your farm. And I mentioned this before, but you might also be a honeybee keeper or be hosting honeybee hives or be buying in bumblebees for supporting pollination. Or you might use pesticides and want to think about your usage of those pesticides and how they can um, still be used while also ensuring the well-being of insect pollinators. A few tangible benefits of writing a plan, really, again, to support that marketable yield of those insect mediated pollinated crops, and also to reduce the risk for, if you aren't using managed pollinators, the need for those managed pollinators, or potentially the need for manual by hand pollination. And there are some crops in different parts of the world where this is already happening. Apples is one example, not that I know of in North America or the States. And vanilla is another example of a crop where hand pollination has started to become necessary due to loss of insect pollination. So, trying to mitigate that potential risk on your farm. And another benefit might be that it helps you to develop a planting or management plan to support insects on your farm, both pollinators and also insects that benefit your crops in other ways, such as insects that are pest predators or those that maybe serve as both pollinators and pest predators. And I'm thinking about some flies, syrphid flies, hovered flies that also um, are good aphid predators as well as being pollinators. And it might be something that you could consider as using for marketing. So maybe you have a customer base that is particularly concerned with pollinator well-being, and there's something that you're doing on your farm or that you want to do on your farm that is particularly exciting to you and supports pollinators by either providing them food or habitat or clean water. So we're going to move away in just a minute from this PowerPoint slide and learn to navigate the pollinator support plan tool on the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association website. And so this is just a snapshot of the homepage, and this is the website itself that I've stuck on the top here. This is vvbga.org. If you have not already created a membership to the VVBGA, this is where you can do that and where we are about to go. I will also invite you, if you feel comfortable doing so, you can sign in and kind of click along as we go through some of the planning tool online if that's helpful to you, or you can just sit back and relax. And this is being recorded so that you can come back to it later. And I am always available to support you as well as if you choose to use the planning tool. I want to also highlight before we get into this that this planning tool is really we are working on creating it so that you can use it in the way that fits your farm the best. So it's not based on any regulations or specifically related to any NRCS practices, for example, or funding, other funding mechanisms. But um, it is possible that we could start to incorporate those things if it is helpful to growers that might want to engage with the tool. And getting feedback from folks will be really essential in that process. But for right now, it is has been created in a way that you should engage with it in a way that it makes sense for you. So we're going to sail away to the tool, and I'm just going to pause my screen share while I um, get us to the website and resume my share. And you should be seeing a web page. Becky, can you just give me a shout out, or somebody give me a shout out that you're actually seeing the web page?
Looks great, Laura.
Okay, thank you. So here we are at the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association webpage. If you're not familiar with this or you're not a member, you can become a member. Um, and you can do that by scrolling to the bottom of this screen where you can become one here using this button, or if you're already one, you can use this button to log in. But before we log in, I wanted to just highlight some of these items that are located in this menu on the left-hand side of the screen, because not only are there some login options, but and you want to use the farm member login, but there's also these other tools, including the pollinator support plan listed here. So I'm sure many of you who are watching this now or watching the recording have engaged with the produce safety plan or maybe the soil health plan. And then the pollinator support plan is also listed here. And if you're not a member and you want to see what the components are of the pollinator support plan are, you can click on that and just see a general outline of the the plan components, which include your general farm information, cover crop selection and management, dedicated pollinator habitat, mowing practices, pest management, pollinator monitoring, tillage practices, water sources, and use of managed pollinators. So that's what you can see and without signing in, and then you've got my contact information here as well. So we're going to sign in under a test account that I have for today and log in. And that'll just bring us to a general welcome page where, again, we have this dashboard, this farm dashboard with all the menu items and some additional items that may not have been there before signing in. And we're going to navigate to the pollinator support information. I also want to draw your attention to this your farm information, because there's some pieces in here that are components of all of the plans, the pollinator support, produce safety, and soil health. And that is a farm description and farm acreage information. And I'll show that in a minute, but I just wanted to highlight that. So we'll go to the pollinator support plan, and that brings you to the Welcome to Pollinator Support on Farms homepage. And if you've never done anything to do with the pollinator support plan before, then you'll probably see a button that says create a pollinator support plan and then this view a plan outline. But because I've entered before, it will show this orange and green button for editing or creating a PDF plan, which I will demonstrate both of those in just a moment. Before we start with any learning how to navigate the ways in which a plan is filled out, this view a plan outline might be a good place to explore and you'll just see this note here that for links to resources to help with planning and example plans, select the black button above that says View a Plan Outline. So I'm just going to show you that. So when I select it, it gives us that outline of a plan that we saw before we signed in. And then it gives us example plans listed here. And you can see they're highlighted when I hover over them, which means they're links. And then each section of the outline has a number of resources that partner with that section that may be helpful to you in thinking about how to support pollinators within the farm context, as you are creating a plan. So cover crop selection and management, just as an example, there are these 4 resources here. So if we just, for example, click on one, it takes us to the document. And if we want to go back, just push the back arrow and we go back. So here we go. I'm going to go back to the Pollinator Support Plan welcome page, and I'm going to edit your Pollinator Support Plan button. And we've tried to model the initial creation of this plan to mirror much of the CAPS produce safety planning tool. And just to have a sense of familiarity of, if somebody has used that tool before, it won't be, a totally strange landscape when you enter the Pollinator Support Plan. That said, some of the language has been transferred over to the Pollinator Support Plan that we are still working on to correct. For example, it says you must complete this section. If you don't complete this section, you can still create a Pollinator Support Plan, but this section will definitely add to your plan. So, so we are on the start here part of the plan. And if you notice on the left-hand side in this menu list, we have some of those sections that were listed in the outline. So the dedicated pollinator habitat, mowing, pest, and water sources. And those are automatically going to be part of your plan. And the reason for that is because these are parts of your farm that inherently are probably in existence. You probably already have pollinator habitat. You probably are mowing, you are managing for pests, and you likely have water sources. And all of those components are either already supporting pollinators in some way or another, or can be enhanced to be better supportive of pollinators. In this part of the start here page, there are these other options that you can add to your plan. So we have the cover crops, the monitoring, the tillage, and the use of managed pollinators, which are also in that outline. And you may or may not have any of these on your farm. And so you can choose to add it to your total plan if you want, or you don't have to if you aren't cover cropping or monitoring or tilling or using managed pollinators. And so I'll just show you what an example of what that might look like. So if I select cover crops, if I want cover crops to be a part of my plan, I'm going to click on that box and it's going to give me a blue check, and that says that I've selected it. And then I'm going to scroll down, and it's going to show me these, go down a little bit more, save draft or next section buttons. I want to include that cover crop section, so I save. And here you can see it's been added to my plan. And if I don't want it, I'm going to unclick it, save again, and then it'll disappear. So there's that. So I'm going to scroll down again, and you'll notice that it says question 1 of 5. So what does that mean? Are there 5 questions on the page that we're currently seeing, or is there something else? There's something else, and if you see these navigation arrows here, this will bring us to question 2 and then 3 and 4 and 5. So this is just question 1 that we're seeing. And so I click this arrow and we scroll back up, and then we see a new space of information that needs to be completed. So this is what I was referring to at the start, where this is the farm, your farm details are something that can be applied to your pollinator support plan, your soil health plan, or your produce safety plan. And in order, if you haven't done these, as I haven't here, you can quickly navigate to that section by hovering over this link and clicking, and then going down to that section of your general information to your farm description. I'll just do something quick, small farm, and your farm size. So let's say there's 2 fields. It's asking for your acreage. We'll say there's 1 acre. Total acres in crop production, we'll say there's half an acre. Acres of vegetables, we'll say all vegetables. Whoops. And then that's it. So once we've done that, we push save, and it'll bring us right back to our pollinator support plan. So then we need to navigate to, we did question 1, and now you can see on question 2 that those items have been filled in, except I noticed I didn't do the half acre. To work with our developer on that. So if I go to question 3, you have an option to choose a cover photo of your plan. So you can use a photo that we have provided from some stock images. These are pictures I've taken on farms in Vermont. You can upload a custom photo, and if you do that, you select this box by choosing a file. I choose my file. I say open, and then this is the photo that I have decided to use. Or you can use a farm photo that's on your account, and that again will bring you back to your farm information page if you want to add a photo there. And I'm going to just navigate to show you, let's see. Oh, let me finish up here. We also have an option for your cover and your initial part of your plan to write a pollinator support plan summary. And this is another way in which we can input information in the plan. And this is just text that you generate. And if you're having a hard time summarizing specific goals and objectives for implementing a pollinator support plan on your farm, which is what this question is asking for, you might see some help text, and it says more or something else, but it has that little black arrow there and it highlights. And this will give you some text to help prompt any information you want to include here. So supporting pollinators is important for my squash production. I plant cover crops for pollinators for season long blooms. So just an example of how information can be input that way. Save. Unfortunately, it brings us back to the first page, but we can quickly navigate to the final section of this part of the plan, where it asks for a map. Again, you don't have to do all of these steps, and this optional wording here helps to reinforce that this is all about what is helpful to you. So if you don't need to have a map as part of your plan, you don't have to have one. Or if having a map is not helpful, then you don't need to include one. But let's say I do have a map and I want to choose a file. This is an example map that I worked on to help out with Luna Blue's pollinator support plan. So I've chosen my pollinator support plan map, which highlights some cover crop strips and blooms on the farm. and I save that, and now that map will be part of my plan. So if I want to see how my plan is looking so far, I can go to View a Plan PDF. It'll open it in another tab, and this will generate that what, goals of my pollinator support plan, a picture if I selected one, which, and then under the farm information, details about my farm, and the map that I created. So to look at a more complete example of a plan that's been generated, this again is the example that I'm showing from Luna Blue, which includes a lot of pictures. So throughout the different sections of the plan and the different ways in which you can share information, one of those ways is through pictures, which we see here. Another way is through entering text. Another way is by checking boxes. And another way is boxes that may be associated with specific numbers, like we inputted some acreage information. But you can see that this plan is 6 pages long. It has a number of pictures that I took on the farm and uploaded to their plan. And then it also has a lot of text. Another example is, we'll look at this farm. This is farm upstream. They have only text in their plan, and their plan is just, it's covers 4 pages. So it's much less detailed in the way that it doesn't include pictures, but it includes information that is helpful to them and how they're thinking about pollinator support on their farm. So I just wanted to show um, what it looks like when you generate that PDF plan and what an example of different plans might look like and how um, kind of detailed you want to get into uploading pictures and maps, or maybe not at all. And that's totally fine. So I just have one more. I guess I'll pause there. If anybody has any questions, I welcome them now before I move on to just one other section, and then we can um, finish up.
How many pictures can you upload, Laura?
How many pictures?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's unlimited, and it should say, let's see, let me find the picture section. Or let me, if I go to the cover crop section, I can show you that as well. This might not have a good example of that.
So
Yeah,
almost every section you can add a picture, I think.
yes. And you can see, like, if you had a number of files to be uploaded, it says unlimited number of files can be uploaded to this field, and it specifies that. So maybe you only have pictures, and that's what you want to display in your pollinator support plan in the different sections, and so um, you can do that. Thank you. What is the cost to join the VVBGA? Vern, you might be better to answer that question than
Sure.
I.
It is currently $70 until the end of January, and now $80 per farm. So that includes all your farm members. But there is an option to enter any amount you can afford. If that is too much money, that would prevent you from participating. So you can join for zero. No questions asked. We want everybody to be a member, and the fees go to the educational and research activities mostly of the association. So if you can pay, that's great, but feel free to join at any amount that is appropriate to your farm.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to just cover one more part of the plan, and I think that'll cover all the ways in which you can share information in different sections, and we'll kind of have given a full outline of the the planning tool. And again, I'll just reiterate that I'm always available to help in any capacity that is useful to you in terms of like phone calls or a farm visit if you want to develop a pollinator support plan. So we've done this kind of introductory page and learned how to navigate the checkboxes and how to get through all the questions. And now I'm going to go into this cover crop selection and management section of the tool to demonstrate that specific section. So this, if we go, we see we have just 4 questions. This is question 1 of 4 that we're going to go through on the cover crop selection and management portion of the plan. And it's asking us, the approximate percent of all your cropland that has cover crop at any time during the growing season, May to September. So this is asking for numbers specifically. And you can see when I put my cursor over that box, there's some arrows here that will allow you to put in a number that way to represent a percentage, but it might be easier to just type something in. So let's say that the answer for me on my farm to this question is 95% of my land is covered cropped at any point in the growing season. Now, the next part of this question is asking me which of the cover cropped land has species that produces flowers. And remembering that flowers are producing nectar and pollen, which are important food components for many types of insect pollinators. And we'll say that 50% of those cover crops that I have produce flowers. And then it's asking for how many months of the year are those flowers actually in bloom from your cover crops. So let's just say that 4 months of the year, there is a blooming cover crop somewhere on my farm. So I'm going to save that and then I'm going to navigate to the next part. So um, maybe that's all you want. Again, here's that optional language. Maybe that's enough for you. Maybe your goal is to increase your months of bloom on your farm to 5. So you've documented that you've got 4 in this snapshot in time of your cover crop, of your pollinator support plan. But here's some more information that you're welcome to fill in. And the field name, we'll just call it cover crop field. And we're going to think about what species of cover crops are going into that field. So just as an example, we'll have peas and oats. Then maybe I have buckwheat. Then let's have Phacelia. And then maybe some mustard. And so those are the crops that I know I'm going to be planting in one particular part of the field. Maybe you have multiple fields. Then it's asking for dates and rates of planting and termination of those cover crop species. Maybe I already have this information documented someplace that instead of writing it in, there's another section of this plan that you could, upload a screenshot of that and display it in the form of an image or photo. Um, or maybe you have a calendar of seeding and bloom dates, which is what I'm going to show in just a minute as an example, instead of entering in all of those details here if it feels burdensome in any way. But if it is helpful and maybe you don't have that information or have thought it through previously, then this is a space where you can add all of that. This final part of the question is asking the number of months in which more than 30% of the cover crop is in bloom. And we'll say that 4 and save. And then we're going to go to the third question. And this is where you can upload some of those photos that may help describe your cover crop plan better. It might be a photo that you've taken of a whiteboard in your farm office that you want to upload here. I will highlight that in the cover crop section of that uh, view a plan button, there is an example of seeding and flowering of the cover crop example um, species that I just written into the plan, peas, buckwheat, phacelia, and field mustard in those resource documents. So maybe you haven't specifically planned for blooming cover crops on your farm before, and this is something you want to try or you have tried, and it highlights in green the seeding dates or seeding time frames and then potential bloom periods. So this is something that you could potentially use or create on your own based on your own cover crop management. So if I choose that, I had previously saved that file and um, want to use it here. So I've done that. And then let's see what the final question is here. Oh, any additional comments you might want to include about your cover crop practices. I'm not going to put anything for right now, but you're welcome to, again, more text space if you want to describe more in depth your cover cropping scheme. So we're going to just view again, what does our PDF look like as a record? And we've seen this already. And looking at that crop section, we can see the information here, and then we can see that calendar of seeding and bloom times from April to September in this case of cover crops on our farm. I'm just going to go back to here. Once you feel like you've um, hit your limit with pollinator support planning, or you've kind of done what you felt like is helpful for your farm, or for you in thinking about these particular management practices or layers within your farm landscape that support pollinators. You just always want to make sure you can save and then you can log out. You could use this PDF plan for your own records. You could also maybe upload it to your farm website if that's helpful for sharing with customers. I've seen that with produce safety plans. So there's different ways in which you can engage with this tool. So I'm going to pause again my share. So how many questions are there and how long does it take? If you answer every single question in the pollinator support plan, there's 39. And how long it takes is really dependent on how in depth you want to go with your planning tool and whether or not you're adding pictures. Also depends on how easily you're able to navigate um, the website and the tool, which over time will get easier as you go through, excuse me, the plan. So it's really, if you just want to spend 15 minutes and really highlight, for example, again, your cover cropping strategies, then you can do that and just, quickly spend a few minutes doing that, and that's it. If you want to invest more time and go through all the other sections of the plan, um, that will take some more time. And you can always come back once you've saved your plan. You can always come back to it and start where you left off. What if I need help making a plan? Here is my contact information and my phone number and email. I'm very happy to have phone conversations, email exchanges, Zoom calls, farm visits to help you create a plan. We can do it on my computer, we can use your computer, whatever is most helpful to you. And I can provide technical assistance in that way. And I also just want to reiterate that when you're engaging with this planning tool, this is just a snapshot in time of how either you're already supporting pollinators or how you are planning to support pollinators on your farm. And there's a lot of the planning tool that we didn't get through today, but just to um, keep our keep within the time allowed of this webinar, I've just given a few examples and happy to go through those other sections. But you can come back to the plan as frequently as you feel is helpful to you. It might be on an annual basis as your rotations change, or maybe you add habitat, or whatever changes in your farm landscape or changes that you're making to improve your pollinator support um, will dictate the frequency at which you feel it is helpful to use your plan. So I thank you very much for your attention today and your questions. And the final slide here is showing the upcoming webinars, and I'll take questions in just a moment. But we've got a few coming up on winter projects and business shifts, high tunnel cucumbers, cultivation equipment, and strategies. So those are the next few weeks. And I'll stop the share. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them and we can address them today, or please feel free to follow up at a future time.
Laura,
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to point out, some of the other sections you didn't show are probably more illustrative than the cover crop section of sort of showing all the best practices around pollinators that you've identified. So the planning is kind of aspirational. I'm thinking of, like in the pesticide section, it's all the ways one might use pesticides and try and protect pollinators. And um, so that's something about writing the plan. I did it for my little homestead. It just makes you think harder about what you're going to do. And then tillage and mowing, the same thing. What are the most management practices you can adopt in each one of those sections for pollinators? Cover crops, obviously, you're trying to get lots of blooms, but it didn't come quite as clear that it's like a list of best practices like some of those other sections are.
Yeah, and I can show that here. I have it right in front of me if that would be helpful, just to quickly demonstrate that point. So if we were at our start here where um, our plan began and we navigated on this menu list to pest management, it'll bring us to those suggested best management practices here. And you can see that in this section, it might go a little bit quicker because we've got some check boxes in terms of I'm rotating crops to avoid pests. And these are non-pesticide control measures. And maybe I'm removing pests by hand, just as two examples. When I go to the next page, again, we've got more check boxes and that are suggesting ways in which you're limiting harm to beneficial insects, which includes pollinators. So maybe I don't use pesticides on my farm. So we select that. And again, more options to click if you are calibrating if you do use pesticides and you calibrate your equipment, how often do you do that to ensure that nozzles are working effectively and efficiently and reducing the amount of potential pesticide in the environment that could potentially impact the well-being of pollinators depending on the pesticide. And again, spray drift management practices, more check boxes, option to upload a photo to illustrate any of how your pest management might reflect some of those best management practices, and then any additional comments. Anything else before we close today?
I have
Or
a
unless,
question for Tim. If you're there, Tim, I see your name. Since your plan was highlighted by Laura. Just curious how you've used it. Is it just personal on your farm, or you sharing it with any of your
Um,
customers or anything?
I haven't actually shared it with customers at all at this point. It's more for me just kind of keeping aware of the practices that I'm doing. A lot of it's just observation as the summer goes by. Um, like one of the things, the initial thing was the breeding site for some of the solitary bees that, it's something that you wouldn't really think about. And here's just a gravel, sandy spot in our parking area that the bees are using for like a 5-day period of time in the early part of spring that you are aware of, that you don't have a lot of traffic in that area that's going to run over the bees that are in the process of breeding for that time. So here's a way that you can avoid eliminating some of the pollinators on your farm. Um, and then as the season progresses, just being aware of what native species that are in hedgerows or other areas around the farm that are blooming that you can just be aware of and mark down, so that as each succeeding progresses, you'll know, okay, I need to not mow those areas at this time of the year. So I think those are the things that have been a benefit for me, to just be aware of and record, so that um, for us and people that are working on a farm can be aware of.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
So again, I would just encourage anyone who is inspired to engage with the pollinator support plan. If someone mentioned at the start that they have an RCS grant or cost share around supporting pollinators on the farm, if there's a way in which that the pollinator support plan can be adjusted to support that planning process, or if you just need help with that, please reach out to me and I will be happy to. Um, it'd be yeah, happy to help with the plan, or we can think about and adjust the tool so that it fits those specific needs a little bit better, or just general navigation and ease of use. That's an ongoing challenge and process that we work through with these online support tools.
Yeah, I just reinforce that point that this is pretty brand new still, and Laura's wide open to suggestions. If you see ways to make it easier to use, we would love your input.
Wonderful. So I think we can close out the webinar for today. And again, thank you very much for joining me and learning about the Pollinator Support Plan. And join us next week for winter projects and business shifts that will be game changers this year on March 13th from 12 to 1. And have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.